Howdy class, this video is going to go over how to code a simple guessing game. We're going to go from start to finish, and we're going to just slowly scaffold our code to get increasingly more complex. You'll see as we go that we're going to just code one feature at a time, one little thing at a time, and get the game up and running. Once we're happy with that, well, then we move on then to the next requirement or the next slice of functionality that we want to add to the game. So this simple guessing game is just the one that we've been playing since elementary school. You know, guess a number between 1 and 5. And if you get the right number, then boom, I'm going to tell you that you are correct. Pretty straightforward. The first requirement that we do is going to just play this very simple game and give the user feedback. But by the end of the game, we'll ask the user to enter the maximum number they want. So now the guessing game would be between 1 and, let's say, 35. And when the user enters a number, let's say 4, our code is going to tell them, oh, nope, you're wrong. You have to go higher. And then they guess another number and we tell them go lower. And if they just get tired of guessing, they can finally just enter a sentinel value and the game ends. And the game then tells us what the real number was, 15. Also, if you guess it right, it'll tell you how many guesses that it took to get the correct number. So this is what we're going to go for today. And we will look at the code again, looking in very discrete steps that we're taking this. Okay, here's the Jupyter notebook that contains the guessing game code. And it's also got the full list of requirements. Now, these are what we will start to code here. 1 through 8, but we're just going to start with 1. We're going to code one thing at a time, get it up and running, get it to a nice stable state where we're happy with it, and then we go on to the next round, okay, or the next list item for functionality. So here's the first one. Here's the exact requirement. We're just going to enter a number 1 through 5. The computer guesses or randomly picks a number 1 through 5, and the user just enters their guess until they get it. When they do get it, we tell them that they answered correctly. If they're incorrect, well, we just tell them to guess again. The loop needs to just keep on going and going until the user eventually gets it right. So pretty straightforward. So here's our code that we'll use. First, we are using random numbers for this. The computer has to generate a random number between 1 and 5 inclusive. So we will use import random that we learned about in this module. And then here is our code. First of all, we're modularizing our code with functions. So we will have a main function, and then we will just call the main. This statement here is just going to generate that random number, and that becomes our computer pick. Then what we'll do is we will use the structure of the user enters a value first. Then for second and subsequent values, they can enter their numbers in a while loop. And then outside of the loop, we give them the feedback if they're correct or not, or if they're correct. So here is the first instance of the user guess. Then we enter the while loop. And that while loop is saying, okay, as long as the user's guess is not equal to the computer pick, well, then we'll just keep going. And that's exactly then what this line does here. It gets the next input and it tells the user, sorry, guess again. And then finally, once they do guess correctly, then we're out of the while loop and this statement executes the congratulations statement. So running this just nice and simple, here's a 2, a 3, and I got it on the second round. Okay, very straightforward for that first one. Let's look at the next requirement now. This requirement says, okay, the user needs to have its input validated. In other words, we tell the user enter a number 1 through 5. Well, we need to catch if they entered something other than that range. So what we'll do here, my strategy here is first, excuse me, we'll create a constant for max and min. That's just so we can then use that constant throughout our program. And then we'll create a function for getting the input. Now, why would we create a function for this? Well, it's because we have 2 spots in our code that we're actually getting input. This one here where we call the input function, and then this one here. So since there's 2 places, rather than typing our code twice in its entirety. That's what functions are for, so we can reuse that code. So here's the first thing I did. I created the min and max constants here, and I'll expand the text just a little bit so you can see better. There's our constants. And of course, before we do anything, let's then update our code to actually then use the constants. So here before, the rand pick was between 1 and 5, and now we're just going to use max and min. And then in this statement, we told the user, way up here, guess a number between 1 and 5, but we don't want to use 1 and 5. We want to use those constants. So this is just updating that to now use the two constants, max and min. Once that's in, then the rest of the code just falls through. Now here's our function. I decided let's create that function that's going to get this validated input from the user. So here's a function just called get input, nice and simple. I've got mine receiving a prompt, and that prompt is just a string prompt telling the user, okay, what to enter. The first prompt would be this string here, guess a number. The second prompt would be, if they got it wrong, we would say, sorry, guess again. So I'm just sending a string in there so we can reuse this code, but still have it sort of customized. Here then we get the user's guess, and then this is our simple input validation loop to check if an entry is within a range. We just check it against the min and the max, and if that doesn't, if it still fails, well then we give them an error message and we tell them, hey, min and max only, and try again. So let me run this code now, and you'll see that if I enter a 3 here, that was wrong. Let me enter a 2, but mistakenly I enter 222. I get the input validation loop kicking in, telling me, wait, you made an error, fix it. Oh, I made another error and another. And finally, I can enter another valid entry, and then we go back into the game engine. And this one's wrong. Let's try a 2, a 4. Hey, I got it right. Okay, let's look at our next requirement. This is just simply, we're going to add a guess counter. And when the game is done, we'll tell the user how many guesses it took them to get the number. And note here that this is the number of valid guesses that it took. So we don't have to count any error made with the input, just valid bona fide guesses. So here's how we would code that. First, we will put in a guess count counter variable. And every time we have a valid guess, we're just going to increment that counter. So here, after the first instance of the guess, we will increment that counter. Then inside the while loop is our second instance of obtaining the guess. And that'll be another place where we will update the counter. Then here in our congratulations string here that we tell the user when they get it right, I'm just going to add in here our guess count counter variable. And then, of course, we'll convert this whole print statement to an F string that we print. So let's see that in action now. Here's our guess a number. I'll say a 4, a 2, a 3. And then there is our response. Congratulations, it took 3 tries. Let's try it again, 5. Hey, there we go. Guessed it right on the first shot, and it only took 1 try. All right, here's our next requirement. If the user is incorrect, then let's nudge them in the right direction. Let's tell them if they have to go higher or lower. And then also, oh, by the way, let's change the computer pick range from 1 to 10. So what's our strategy for this? Well, first, we're just simply going to change the constant max to 10. And then that flows through the rest of the program. We don't have to make any other changes because we use constants. If you happen to code a 10, if you previously coded a 5 in your code, well, now you have to hunt and pick for all of those 5s and change them to 10. That's why we use constants. All right. And all we need to do here within our game engine, And by game engine, I mean the loop that is just conducting the engine. It's just, that this game is going to keep going until we get a resolution. All we have to do there is just kind of put a guard in front of the user's guess. If the user's guess is greater than the computer pick, that means that the user guess has to go down. So I'll give a different prompt here, just saying guess again lower, and I'll use that same get input statement or a function that we created before, just with a different prompt. Otherwise, we know that they have to go higher. So it's just this one simple if statement that is going to validate or tell them if they have to go lower or higher. So let's see this in action now. I'll guess a 10 to start, and it tells us to go lower, lower. Hey, and there we go. Took only 3 tries. Let's try something here. 5, go lower, a 1. All right, good. A 10, go lower, a 1, higher, a 9, lower, a 2, higher. Wow, that was a struggle, but I got it. Only took 8 tries. So again, to recap, the change we made here was just simply adding in this if-else structure inside the while loop to guide the user of which way to go. All right, here's our next requirement. We are going to use an outer loop and allow the user to run the game again if they desire. Or they can just press, Q to quit or N to quit, doesn't matter. All right, well, we've done this before. So the very first thing we do is that we take all of our previous code here that we know is going to be inside the loop. And all of this code here is what would be repeated in any single game. So what we do is we take that code and indent it that way. And then we add a while loop header at the top of it. Then we just add some glue. We'll need this another game variable, and we'll initialize it to lowercase y. And there's our while loop. As long as another game remains lowercase y, well, then the game will continue. So that's the top of the loop. At the end of the loop now, at the end of the game engine, we'll have to put in some code asking the user if they want to play again. So we've done this before. There's the input statement. Note that we are going to convert whatever got entered into a lowercase. So we only have to check against one lowercase. And then here's a typical input validation loop. Make sure that you're always using input validation loops for any user entry. So that's just going to validate and make sure that they enter only a Y or an N. And then that's the rest of our changes here. So let's see here how this would work. All right, I'm guessing. It took 3 tries, great. And now I can enter a Y or an N. First, I'm going to enter something that's not. Here's an I, another I, and you're saying we're getting the input validation loop catching us now. I'll enter a lowercase y, and the game starts again. Let's try it again. They replayed the game, took 3 tries, and then now I'll hit N for quitting the game, and we're done. All right, well, let's add the next requirement. And this one is add the guess counter to the feedback that the user gets at each guess. So how are we going to do this? Well, we already have a guess counter going. We just need to add a label to it. So what we'll do here is when we tell the user to guess again, we'll give them the guess number. So here's some sample output. Guess number 2, go higher. Guess number 3, go lower, etc. We don't need to tell them that at the very beginning of the game because it's going to be very clear what their first guess is. So just inside the while loop is where we'll put this guess counter. And all we have to do is simply convert that, that input statement to an F string. If we look before, it was not an F string. It was just simply saying guess again lower. So let's convert that to an F string. And that will let us then put in this variable nice and easy. And of course, we want to, that guess counter doesn't get incremented until a little bit later. So I'm going to offset that by 1 so we get the correct counts. So playing this. Guess number 2 go higher, that's working. And there we go, I'll play again. And there we go. So again, all we did for this one to add the guess counter to the feedback after every guess is we just simply added this guess counter here. And that was enabled because we had converted this input statement to use an F string. All right, on to the next requirement. This is where they can surrender. The user, on their second and subsequent guesses, they can enter a sentinel value to surrender. So if it happens, let them know, okay, you surrendered, and give them the number of guesses that they had up to that point, and then also tell the user what the computer pick was. So what's our strategy here? So easy. First, let's create a constant for our sentinel here, and that's what that is. Sentinel equals -99. We name it in all caps because it's a constant. And now we're just going to add some code in here to make sure that they can enter a -99 to quit. So what I do here is before we had the game engine, the while loop for it was if the user guess is not equal to the computer pick. But we have to add to that, the user guess can't be the computer pick, and it also can't be the sentinel in order for the game to keep going. Because if they enter a sentinel, well, then we're stopping. So this code here, it's just going to put the computer pick and the sentinel into an easy list here. And we'll use this while variable not in list construct, and then keep everything else the same. Now, we only want to increment the guess counter if the sentinel was never entered. So here's the first place where a user gets to input a number. And let's handle the case where they decide, oh, I made a mistake. I don't want to play. I want to enter a sentinel right away. Well, this is going to guard against that and make sure that we don't increment the guess counter if they surrender. So this if statement does that. And then we do that exact same thing down here. If they enter the sentinel, well, then the guess counter is not incremented. And that's all we needed. And then here at the very end, we had to just modify our congratulations statement because we won't always say congratulations. If the user decides to surrender, then we'll give them a completely separate message. We will tell them, and what I've selected here is this statement here. Before you surrendered, you made 5 guesses. The correct number was 4, something like that. So there's what that output looks like. Before you surrendered, you made 3 guesses. The number was 3. And that's all we really needed to do in order to display that the correct messaging and in order to get our code branching properly and displaying the correct things here. We're just adding an extra little guard here to make sure that the count isn't incremented, and then making sure that the sentinel is accounted for in the while loop. All right, and then here is the very last requirement. Allow the user to enter the max computer pick at the start of the program. So,
sorry, I'm not sure.
Computer stop. That's my Alexa chanting in because I said the word computer. So now here, since the user is going to input the maximum, we no longer need a constant. So I took, in this code here, I took the constant out and I just combined them into one statement now to declare both min and sentinel. Now, instead of max as a constant, we're going to use max as a variable. And that's because the user is going to enter max. So here is that code. We're just going to obtain the user's maximum number in this little code block. And then we've got a simple input validation loop there to make sure that they're entering a positive number, something greater than 1. And then since we have this max variable, well, we need to go back and change every instance of capital Max here to lowercase max. So it uses the right variable, okay? So that's what I did down here. Every single max is now replaced with the lowercase max, which is the variable. And we can see here now when we run it, that let's say our pick is now going to be 50. This could be a long game. Let's see if I can do it in about 6 tries. Guess number 2, go lower, and I tell the user what they can enter to surrender. So I'll enter a 12. Let's go with 6. Hey, and I got it right, only 3 tries. So we see here that the prompt for guess a number 1 through 50, that 50 was based on the user's maximum value that they entered. So we need to use that variable. Okay, gang, well, I hope that this helped in going through the process of coding a simple game, and a guessing game is a great game to experiment with. Now, this week's programming project is your rock, paper, scissors game, and that's going to be an awful lot of fun. And you'll be able to use these same precepts that I laid out in this video. And additionally, I've got the assignment coded so that you just code one thing at a time and just get it running before you go on to the next segment. Okay, hope this helped everybody.